You're delivering, you're steady, you're showing up for your people, your priorities, and your performance goals, even when the culture around you feels like it's starting to unravel. And you can feel it, the silence in meetings, the polite disengagement, the drop in energy. You worry that your people are burning out, pulling back, and no one is saying it out loud. And somehow, in a room full of leaders, it's you who's holding the emotional weight, holding the culture, the team, the tone, while still being expected to drive results. And the truth is, you're not just trying to hold it together, you want to lead at the highest level. You want to be seen, not just as reliable, but as a force, as executive material, as the one who can protect what matters and move the whole organization forward. If that's you, this is your episode. I'm going to walk you through 7 enterprise level strategies that powerful executive women use to protect culture, build credibility, and reignite momentum across the system. These are the moves that elevate your presence, expand your influence, and help you lead culture on purpose. Because if you don't, it will drift. And you're not here to drift, you are here to lead. But before you can influence culture or lead momentum across the enterprise, you have to reclaim control of what you're actually driving. Because when everything feels urgent, influence evaporates. And when you're carrying emotional and strategic weight for everyone else, it's easy to lose sight of your own clarity. One of the most powerful leadership moves you can make, especially in times of complexity, is to stop performing under pressure and start prioritizing with precision. Not just for your own sanity, but to model clarity for everyone watching. If you want to be seen as a senior leader, not just a high functioning executor, you must be ruthlessly clear about what matters, what moves the enterprise, and what doesn't belong on your plate anymore. So let's start there. First, I want you to get ruthlessly clear on your priorities. In turbulent environments, everything will feel urgent. But treating everything as urgent is a guaranteed path to overwhelm and sometimes mediocrity. Strong leaders know that priority is singular, what matters most right now. Getting really clear starts with defining your top 3 priorities for this season, not the whole decade. So, for example, you could create a not now list, good ideas that must wait. Make your team's focus visible in meetings, project boards, and in daily rhythms. And most importantly, follow up on it. Say no to distractions, even attractive ones, to preserve energy for what truly matters. Momentum aligned leadership systems teach you that clear focus multiplies speed, quality, and morale. In uncertainty where resources are stretched, focusing isn't optional, it's survival. And then once you're clear on what truly matters, the next leadership challenge is just as critical, defining what success actually looks like. Because even when priorities are solid, teams stall when the finish line is fuzzy. In fast moving environments, vague goals drain momentum, frustrate stakeholders, and force you into constant clarification mode. And at the executive level, unclear expectations don't just slow down deliverability, they dilute your credibility. If you want to be seen as someone who leads with clarity and drives results at scale, you need to make sure that your team and your cross functional partners know exactly what done looks like before the work even begins. The most influential leaders don't just know what to focus on, they define success early, precisely, publicly. So let's talk about how. So, 2, I want you to define done clearly and early. Because nothing saps morale faster in complexity than vague finish lines. If your team doesn't know what done looks like, they either overwork, chasing invisible perfection, or underwork, fearing hidden standards they can't see. At the start of every project, define success in crystal clear terms. Perhaps build shared checklists, confirm midstream that everyone is aligned, and when done is achieved, close the loop so people feel the satisfaction of real progress, not endless spinning. High performing leadership playbooks don't just emphasize high standards, they emphasize visible, agreed upon finish lines. But we know that even the clearest goals fall apart if no one knows where they stand. Defining done gives you internal clarity, but what builds external trust is how you communicate along the way. In a culture of uncertainty, people don't just want direction, they want truth. They want to know what's working, what isn't, and whether they're being told the full story. At the enterprise level, radical transparency is a visible strategy. Now, it's not about oversharing. It's about being the leader who can name reality, share the why behind decisions, and create stability through honesty. And this is how you build influence across functions, deepen alignment, and establish yourself as someone people listen to, not just because of your title, but because of your clarity. If you want to be known as a culture carrier and strategic voice, transparency isn't a risk, it's a power move. So here's how to lead with it. So, number three, I want you to learn to communicate with radical transparency. In complexity, information hoarding creates fear, and lack of transparency, well, that breeds rumor mills. Leaders who thrive during tough seasons lead with radical, timely honesty, not just polished perfection. Radical transparency means sharing what you know, what you don't know, and what you're doing about both. It means building regular, predictable communication rhythms so your team isn't left filling in the blanks themselves. The momentum playbook approach is grounded in trust as a leadership strategy, not just a value. And radical transparency is one of the clearest accelerators of deep, lasting trust, even under pressure. But transparency alone isn't enough. It's not just what you communicate, it's how you show up that matters. Because when stakes are high and change is constant, your tone, energy, and emotional presence become just as influential as your strategy. Look, people are reading you long before they respond to your words. And at the enterprise level, emotional intelligence is more than an interpersonal skill. It's a leadership differentiator. It's how you earn trust in rooms where power dynamics are real. It's how you influence across silos, build coalitions, and diffuse resistance before it becomes a barrier. The women who rise aren't just decisive, they're attuned. If you want to lead culture and momentum across the system, then you also need to know how to read the room, regulate your own signals, and lead with emotional clarity. So let's talk about how executive presence starts with emotional intelligence. So, number four, we're going to learn more about leading with emotional intelligence to influence across power centers. In moments of complexity, your emotional intelligence, or as some call it, your EQ, i.e., the ability to recognize, understand, and manage emotions, and to read, respond to, and influence the emotions of others, becomes your edge. Not because you avoid hard truths, but because you deliver them with the precision and presence that earns trust. Practically, this means expanding your listening beyond your own team. Pay attention to what's being said in stakeholder meetings. Use emotional intelligence to sense resistance early and influence outcomes before formal decisions are made. Build trusted relationships, not just vertically, but diagonally, horizontally, across legal, ops, finance, and people functions. Leaders who master EQ at scale are the ones invited into conversations that shape the future, not just manage the now. Culture is shaped by how leaders show up in the hardest moments. When you model calm, clarity, and relational awareness at the enterprise level, you don't just protect your reputation, you reinforce the culture you want to scale. Emotional intelligence builds connection, it earns trust, and it gets you in the room. But once you're there, leading across functions, shaping decisions, influencing culture, people want to know what you stand for. And that's where purpose becomes your power position. In fast-moving organizations, it's easy to get swept up in urgency and execution. But the leaders who command lasting respect are the ones who consistently tie what they do to why it matters. They keep the long game in view, and they use purpose not just as a value, but as a leadership strategy. If you want to be seen as a culture shaper, a systems thinker, a leader who elevates the enterprise, not just runs the team, you have to lead with purpose. And not occasionally, consistently. So let's talk about how to operationalize it. So number five, make purpose your power position. At the executive level, visibility isn't just about performance, it's about point of view. You're no longer being evaluated only on what you deliver. You're being evaluated on how clearly you can articulate what matters, why it matters, and how your work moves the organization toward its future. The women who rise aren't just high performers, they're meaning makers. They're the ones shaping how people think, feel, and act across the system. And in moments of complexity and change, purpose becomes more than a motivational phrase, it becomes a strategic tool. When everything is shifting, purpose keeps people grounded. It acts as a decision filter, a message framework, and a cultural accelerant. When you lead with purpose consistently, you become the one reinforcing alignment, connecting the dots, and helping people see the bigger story, not just the next task. Operationalizing purpose means tying your work and your team's work back to the values and mission of the enterprise. Ask at every leadership table, does this move us closer to who we say we are? When people are stretched thin and overwhelmed, this is how you cut through the noise and anchor focus. Talk openly about how your initiatives advance the mission. Share real stories of how your work is impacting people, customers, employees, communities. Use short, vivid reminders of why it all matters, and then say it again. Because in high-stress environments, people forget faster than you think. This isn't just about messaging, it's about meaning, and meaning builds resilience. We know tasks drain people, especially in fast-paced environments where burnout is real, and unfortunately, acknowledgement sometimes is rare. But when people feel emotionally connected to their work, their capacity multiplies. Purpose fuels energy, deepens engagement, and builds cultural coherence, all of which are essential to sustained momentum at the enterprise level. If you want to be seen as a leader who drives not just performance, but culture, not just output, but alignment, then purpose is your power position. It's how you become the voice people trust when direction is unclear, and it's how you lead beyond your lane. And it's how you become known, not just for what you do, but for how you make the entire organization stronger. This reminds me of an experience I had when I worked in strategy and innovation at the Coca-Cola Company. Times were hard. Restructuring, stock fluctuations, tough markets, morale was very low. They called an all-hands meeting. The then CEO, Neville Isdell, delivered a powerful speech tying the vision for the company back to its roots, its values, and its purpose. And a powerful soundtrack from the British group Keane accompanied the speech in the packed hall. And I'll tell you, something shifted that day. And it was such a masterful example of rebuilding culture that I remember it to this day, almost 20 years later. And if I hear the song from that meeting, I think of that day. And Neville Isdell, now in his 80s, is a big supporter of educational programs at the school my kids attend. So he returns to campus every year to present a student award. And every time I see him, I think of that town hall. That's how powerful of an experience it was. Purpose sets the direction, but culture determines whether people stay on the journey. So once you've aligned your leadership to something bigger than tasks and metrics, your next move is to make sure that sense of meaning actually lives in the day-to-day experience of your organization. Because no matter how inspiring your strategy sounds in a town hall, if the culture doesn't reflect it, people will stop believing. Culture isn't built in mission statements or all-hands meetings. It's built in behavior. It's how people treat each other when no one's watching. It's how leaders respond under pressure. It's what gets protected, rewarded, and what gets quietly ignored. The truth is, even high-performing organizations can lose their cultural center when no one is actively safeguarding it. If you're committed to leading with influence, then protecting culture is your job. So let's talk about how to lead that responsibility with clarity, consistency, and power. So number 6, protect the culture you want to keep. Culture isn't self-sustaining, especially under stress. When leaders get distracted by external chaos and neglect internal norms, you've probably all seen this, toxic behaviors can creep in quietly and destroy team cohesion. Protecting culture must be a conscious, intentional, daily leadership act. To protect culture, define core values. and behaviors, not just words, and celebrate them when you see them. Correct misalignments quickly but respectfully. Keep rituals alive, team shoutouts, learning sessions, humor breaks. In turbulence, these small cultural touch points become even more important. Momentum-driven leadership systems teach you that culture is your operating system. You can't outsource it. You have to defend it. Every meeting, every project, every tough conversation. Culture doesn't drift overnight, but when it does, it takes momentum with it. And as a leader, it's not enough to just defend what the culture was. You have to rebuild what the culture needs to become, especially after a disruption. Whether it's a reorg, a layoff, a loss of key talent, or just prolonged exhaustion, there comes a moment when even the most high-performing teams stall. And you've been there probably, you've sensed that. The energy is gone, the trust is thin, and everyone's waiting for someone to name it and restart the engine. And this is where your leadership becomes catalytic. Because momentum doesn't regenerate by accident. It has to be rebuilt with intention. One clear move, one reset signal, one renewed rally point at a time. The leaders who are respected most across the enterprise aren't just the ones who push through disruption. They're the ones who know how to bring people back together afterward. So if you've been sensing that things have slowed down, that your team is quiet but heavy, that the culture isn't broken perhaps, but maybe it's just bruised, then this next move is for you. So let's talk about how to rebuild momentum with clarity, trust, and forward motion. So finally, we want to learn to build momentum intentionally after disruption. Look, we know disruption happens. As we've said, layoffs, restructures, market crashes, world events. But strong leaders don't sit back and hope that energy magically returns. They intentionally rebuild it. After a disruption, set a new short-term goal that feels achievable and energizing. Name the transition. Let them know we're closing one chapter and beginning another. Reset expectations and celebrate small, early wins, fast and visibly. People can re-engage when you make it safe and exciting to do so. Momentum is not spontaneous, it's crafted. That's why strong leadership playbooks include specific plays for regaining speed, purpose, and energy after hard seasons. Complexity isn't going anywhere, but neither is your capacity to lead through it powerfully. Your leadership isn't defined by how well you manage chaos. It's defined by how intentionally you create clarity, protect culture, and move the organization forward. The women who lead with influence don't just react. They shape what comes next. They turn purpose into action. They use emotional intelligence as strategy. They build momentum after setbacks and become known not just for what they deliver, but for how they lead with vision, conviction, and cultural integrity. Clarity, culture, momentum. These aren't fluffy leadership words. They are the engines of teams and organizations that survive turbulence and come out stronger. And if that's the kind of leadership you're ready to step into, you're in the right place. Because the strategies I've just shared in this episode are just the beginning. Because here's what I suspect. You probably need some more tools, but that's not enough. You need a full playbook, and that's exactly what I help you build. So if this resonated, hit subscribe, drop a comment, and share this with another woman who's ready to lead with purpose, presence, and power. Just remember, you're not leading alone, and the best is ahead. See you next time.